All right, welcome everyone this evening. It is October 22nd, and this is the San Lorenzo Valley Emergency Network general meeting. And tonight's topic is earthquake. And I just thought, we had been planning this subject for many months, but in September, when we had a little quake in oh, now I'm gonna forget what a little town is just south of us here. Aromas, on the 29th. For myself, it was just this perfect timing of reminder that, um, earthquakes are still happening. And it was also that particular one when it hit, I was asleep and my shake alert went off. I was barely awake enough to even understand it, but I thought that was a pretty interesting test of that system. We'll talk a little bit more about that this evening. And then, of course, just this last week was the 35th anniversary of the 1989 Loma Prieta quake. And maybe some of you were here, and maybe some of you were not here, but could have felt it. So it's a course is used these days as a reminder for preparation. We'll talk this evening about preparing for disasters like earthquakes. So with that, we'll start actually with some time remembering Loma Prieta. All right, and this is from a USGS website, and this is some photos of the Loma Prieta quake. Let's see. And there's actually some captions here. I'll enable those. There may be small text, but here we go. So this was, again, Loma Prieta in 1989. This, I believe, must be San Francisco, corner of Alice and 13th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And this says it's the Old Town Historical District in the city of Salinas. This one's interesting. This is Tom Brokaw of NBC News, preparing his broadcast from the Marina District of San Francisco. Tom Brokaw when he was young.
Okay, that's locally. Tammy had asked us to, Dan and I, because we were here for this, to comment. So I'm gonna focus on directing your attention to things that happened here. So when they're talking about the Pacific Garden Mall, we are talking downtown Santa Cruz in shambles.
These dogs, are specially trained to, I don't know if these are the particular dogs, but they did have dogs that were specially trained for sniffing out bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were all search and rescue personnel. This was a store that's now, I believe, or was in the mall, downtown.
I want to say there's a little delay happening between when I click and when it advances. So I apologize if it seems either to be too slow or too fast at times.
Okay. Again, more downtown. This could have been a lot of places. We do have an extensive geology department at UCSC, so they were on this pretty quickly.
Well, I can't tell if it's my laptop that's working too hard or just the the little mice running the internet.
Okay.
Sorry, it's taking some time.
Remember that in 1989, cell phones were not widely used, and people were creating information streams the best that they could. And so that van with the messages on it was part of that. This is probably Marina District, which means it was in San Francisco. That's downtown Santa Cruz. It was a major department store on the order of J.C. Penney's that was there and had to be torn down.
Watsonville, actually.
Yes. Oh, that's the Watsonville one. Sorry. Thank you, Bob.
This is Joel. There was one on the Santa Cruz Mall, Garden Mall, that also had damage. I think someone perished in that collapse of the Fords.
Yeah, could be.
Turned off the captions in hopes that this would become more responsive, but it has not really become any more responsive. My apologies.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Marina District again.
Mm-hmm. Part of the a large contributor to the damage that we're seeing here, especially with these large houses in San Francisco, was the fact that they were built on soil that became essentially liquid or like jello during the earthquake and really moved things around. This is the freeway here, the Highway 1 between Watsonville and Santa Cruz.
And we've got, I think in this cache, there's several close-up photos showing some more of the damage here. Well, not necessarily sequential, but we'll come back to them.
Yes. This is a house up in Boulder Creek. There's some geologically fragile areas up there, and since there hadn't been any motion of any sort in collective memory, this was quite a surprise to everyone. That looks like Watsonville.
Yeah, Watsonville, and I recall the caption actually said that this house jumped off of its foundation. And this is the staircase that used to lead up to this front porch of the house. The house shifted there to the right.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Because the building standards of especially these older houses, many of them were not attached to the foundations adequately they just sat on them. So when the shifting started happening, they would shift a little to the left or a little to the right or what north, south, however you want to see it. And you can see here where this one basically fell off the foundation. This was an issue in downtown Santa Cruz, especially out towards the coast, down in the Blackburn area of Santa Cruz. That's where a lot of their damage was. Needless to say, when this happens, these houses become unlivable, and the people who own them or live in them are without, well, obviously, here again, without a place to live. I think this looks like Boulder Creek too.
This is probably one of those houses that was built where the front of the house is on the flat and the rest of the house is hanging off of a steep cliff. Because steep is cheap.
Yep.
Yeah, the caption for this one was that they were trying to shore up the building from completely tipping off of its foundation.
All right, it's just a little delay here.
Okay. It's kind of how the inside of Dan's and my house were after the earthquake, because despite tying most of our bookshelves to the wall, the stuff just walked out. I just walked off of shelves and fell on the ground all over my house. I had a 5-pound container of sugar walk out of a cabinet and land on the floor and wind up everywhere. So
Obviously looking at the road damage near the coast.
mhm.
And I can't remember where did we think this might have been?
Down at the yacht harbor. Could be in Moss Landing also.
Yeah.
How many people here were here for this quake? Just put your hand up. Yeah. So this is a really great example of why, if you are in a building during an earthquake, you should stay inside. And if you're outside, you should stay outside. Because you can see if people were running in and out of doors, those bricks would have landed on them, causing them much further injury.
we just have a couple more here. Yeah, this is obviously, this is from downtown Santa Cruz also. So this one as well.
Mhm. That's downtown Santa Cruz. On that side of the street.
Mhm.
Downtown Santa Cruz had a really unique feel, and it was a very Santa Cruz-y place. It had the ambiance of Santa Cruz, and of course, what was put back in didn't share that as much as what we had before. So it was a crucial change in the culture downtown.
Yeah, one of my personal memories is the Cooper House was kind of the
Yes.
core or the heart of that downtown Pacific Garden Mall. Very unique building, and but made out of stone
Mhm.
and brick, and of course it didn't look damaged, but it was significantly compromised by
Mhm.
the breaking, and of course it was ultimately totally replaced. And I think that was maybe the biggest loss of kind of that charm that you're mentioning, Liz, for the
Well,
downtown mall, was that corner.
mhm. If you look at this photo, you can see where pieces of trees were sheared off from falling debris. And that was one of the things that was beautiful about downtown, were all the trees that were quite, they provided an ambiance and shade and a place for people to sit and talk. So, yeah, so it wasn't just the buildings that were impacted. Almost all the trees downtown had to be taken out. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Joel. And so, folks should know what Joel Lauscher, is that how you pronounce your name?
Lauscher, yes.
Lauscher from United Policyholders is with us this evening. But Joel, you mentioned that you lived in the area at the time.
Yeah, my wife and I, and we're both UC Santa Cruz graduates, actually, from the late 70s, we'll say. But we moved, so we lived in the Bay Area. And when we got the opportunity in 1986, we moved back to Santa Cruz in West Side, Santa Cruz Street, in a newer home. And just as another contrast here, so we had a newer construction, newer building codes. I had actually, my job had changed, and then I was traveling back and forth from San Francisco. And my wife actually came up and met me in the Bay Area that evening of the earthquake. And of course, you didn't even get news out of Santa Cruz that night because there were no television crews to broadcast that to the Bay Area stations. It was kind of an amazing thing. We had the old time phones, as Liz mentioned, and the phone lines were down between much of Santa Cruz and surrounding areas. So you couldn't even call someone to find out if they were okay. And Highway 1 ended up being closed, 17. So we didn't get to go back till the next day. And we knew there was a lot had happened. But our newer home, amongst all this chaos, we had a coffee cup fall out of our cabinet. That was the extent of our damage. And it
Mhm.
was because, of course, we were bolted to the foundation, wasn't a brick foundation. And, you know, it was just a difference. The west side actually didn't do as badly because it has a different soil content. And of course, the mall was, you know, a riverbed with softer soils, less stability. And all of these things, you know, played out in that earthquake, you know, somewhat predictably, but of course, nobody ever expected something this awful to happen. But, you know, this is kind of why we have all the new building codes and such, you know, that so tough way to learn, you know, obviously number of fatalities on the mall and then town and actually just say, last comment, I was driving out of San Francisco when the earthquake hit and I was on the freeway and my car started wobbling and I thought I had a flat tire, but everybody started pulling over like thinking they had flat tires. And you realize it wasn't you, something bigger was happening. And so, you know, you felt very lucky if you came through it pretty well unscathed. And then, you know, obviously, then the work began. And at my job, I was working at the Department of Insurance. A couple of months later, we actually started creating the forms, myself and one of my coworkers, we were creating the policy forms for the soon to be created California Earthquake Authority. So there was a whole team of people starting that process of creating broader earthquake coverage.
Oh, fascinating. Got a few more photos. Liz, you recognize this
Yes,
one?
this is St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Watsonville, which if you go above, you can see there's the front of the church and then there's a spire that goes up. The top of that spire fell off. And that congregation was faced with rebuilding at that time. So we had people in Watsonville who were so frightened by this situation that if you're familiar with Watsonville, you know that the downtown is there's a Spanish term for it and I can't remember it, but basically it's an open air square. It's like the old commons on the East Coast for small towns. And there were people camping there because they were afraid to go back home because we had a fairly extensive aftershocks. Okay, they weren't as anywhere near as destructive, but there was lots of it. So people stayed on edge for a long time. And I wanted to comment that Highway 17 was closed for probably 2 or 3 months, which left traffic to get out of the county going over Highway 9 for
I remember Halloween.
Mhm.
So this was only a few weeks.
Yeah.
Later, driving home on Highway 9 through downtown Boulder Creek with the Halloween festivities, and the traffic was backed up for miles and miles because all of the 17 traffic was going on 9 to get home.
Mhm.
Huh.
Those children were in Watsonville. I could recognize the architecture.
And this image might have been from San Francisco. Not quite sure. clear.
I'm not quite sure either, but I know that especially downtown, there were a number of cars that were, I don't know if they were totaled, but probably due to falling brick and falling trees and just falling debris of various kinds.
Can only imagine what's going through that person's head.
That was probably Watsonville as well.
Of course, that's the 880.
Which is one of the Oakland freeways that collapsed.
I was driving home from work on 17 when the earthquake happened, and by and large, I didn't notice it. It was weird. I noticed three things happening kind of simultaneously. People were purling over, like you said, and I didn't notice anything. But I noticed that the radio station I was listening to went off the air. And then I noticed a little landslide by the reservoir of just, a little bit of debris rolling down. And then I hit the scan button on the radio, FM, and, this is Bay Bridge, okay. And it just kept going around. No stations were on the air.
I was just going to say, clearly Dan 35 years ago was driving like a maniac at that time if he didn't notice the earthquake.
Yep.
He must have. And he was swerving all over the place, driving fast.
Whee! Yeah, well, that's what we did, when you work over the hill.
I just have this fantasy, Dave, of the quake of as he was driving over 17, everything was just like shuffling, sliding down right behind him, because he made it through unscathed. So
although
all of the Hollywood videos are based on Dan's experience driving during the earthquake. All those videos of, chaos behind.
Right. Well, and I realized after seeing those pictures of the collapsed freeways that if one of the bridges had fallen, I probably would have been had driven off of it too, like the other cars did. But then somebody got on the ham radio and kept saying, "This is the big one. This is the big one." And I'm driving along going, I don't see anything. Once I got to Scotts Valley, I did start to see the smoke.
Yeah, this was again in San Francisco, I believe.
This is a book that we own, but may have gotten ruined in one of the floods, ironically. Where some of these pictures came from that was documenting the earthquake. And so this is one of the pictures that showed the areas of greatest damage. We've been wondering why some of these areas, what did they have in common? Was it, non-standard building practices? Was it the earth, the liquefaction? We certainly know in the, downtown Santa Cruz, it was mostly the unreinforced masonry that was the issue. But
well, and they had a big flood in 55 that seemed to have damaged a lot of the basements and never got properly fixed, I guess, or.
Were you ever in the basement of the bookshop Santa Cruz?
I have not been, no.
It was scary. It was claustrophobic. It was, you could see the unreinforced masonry, and the ceiling height was about 6'5" maybe, and racks of books, bookshelves in the.
Not a place I would have wanted to be in an earthquake.
Yeah, the last place.
Yeah.
Of course, now we have Costco to be worried about, but
In a quake, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yes, a whole pallet of TV sets come flying off the shelf.
All right. Bob Gray, I understand you were also in the area at the time.
Yeah,
You
I
had
was
comments
actually,
of your experience.
yeah, I was in Felton and when the earthquake hit, right in front or on Graham Hill Road in front of Safeway. And like everyone else has described, except Dan, that we felt like we had a flat tire. So we pulled over, and like everyone else said, everybody else was pulling over too. And then we noticed there used to be some oak trees out in front, and those oak trees were kind of going with a ripple in the ground. It was like nothing I've ever seen then or again since. But uh, we proceeded home, and as we drove through Felton, we saw a lot of masonry buildings with that damage. The fire station had some mild damage to it, so walls had separated, but it was still structurally sound. Lots of chimneys falling down. It was, yeah, just anything that had a brick facade or cinder block construction had some sort of damage. When I got home, our house was the kitchen had a smell about it that was quite potent. It was every spice and vinegar and anything else you can imagine that had fallen out of the cabinets and mixed on the floor. And so I was just recounting that with my parents the other day. The smell that it created, I've never smelled anything quite like that since. I was lucky. My whole family was safe, and we camped out in the front yard because that next day, the 24 hours after the earthquake, I think we got something like 30 aftershocks, and the next day it was like another 16 or 17, something like that. So it was just unnerving to sleep in the house with stuff falling down as you pick stuff up and just fall back down if it was a substantial one. So it's just forget it, we're gonna go and camp. And so it was kind of a nice little neighborhood get together, impromptu. Following that, kind of on the fire department side of things, much like the phones were out, all communications. Our 911 system was down, the radio system was down, so everybody was very much isolated and handling business. In Felton, they did over a course of several days went to every house in the fire district and checked in and made sure there was nobody that needed anything. And it was because there was no way for people to call in for help. So another thing that was done early on, I believe, was set up the Felton Fire ambulance was at the Felton Fair Shopping Center, basically for walk-up medical care. And so that was something that we did. There were some concerns about looting in Felton because there's no power and it was dark. And so I know a lot of my stepfather was a volunteer at the time, and he tells the stories of walking the streets and making sure nobody was doing anything they shouldn't have been. So I think my experience, at least, is that most of the damage occurred in areas with a certain type of geology. Kind of the less stable types of soils. I don't know that's exclusively true, but in a lot of the places we saw damage throughout the county, it was indeed because of the soil type. So, or the construction type, not being bolted to the foundations played a big role. And being in construction later, before I went into the fire service, I had put in many pieces of hardware to anchor things to foundations and shear walls and whatnot. And I'm not certain, but houses may just explode if you get a big enough earthquake because they're so rigid now. But you know, overall my experience was not terrible. I mean, other than having to clean up a big mess. I think that the services and whatnot, everybody pulled together in the community and made it happen. And so it's good to remember these things, good to prepare, good to recount these experiences so we don't make the same errors in the future. So, but that's about all I have.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to contribute a memory from Loma Prieta, we could entertain that.
One thing I want. Go
I
ahead.
was,
Go ahead, Tom.
In Santa Cruz. No, I wasn't in Santa Cruz. I was in Sunnyvale, at the Onizuka Air Force Base, on the 4th floor that evening. I was the swing shift supervisor, and we all started rocking and rolling up there in that flexible building, and bookcases and stuff came tumbling down everywhere. Our mainframe computer slipped into its cable tray holes and tilted over, and all of our, we were doing satellite ops there, and so all that stopped. We sorry I disappeared. My camera's kind of cheap, and we did. We tried to do ops out of a different place, but they managed to get our computers back online pretty quick. And got home that night. My wife mad at me for not calling because I couldn't call, and all we'd lost was a bottle of wine out in a closet. So, but the reason we act is the Watsonville response team for Watsonville Airport. I run the group that we're trying to put together to respond to future events, because in '89 the Watsonville Airport was heavily used for disaster response. There was airplanes coming from all over the state, bringing us everything that anybody could think of: diapers and cans of beans and paper towels, and it was all very unorganized initially. The airport was just full of airplanes of people dropping off stuff, and nobody at the airport had any clues to what to do with it or who to call or anything. So that's what we've set up at the Watsonville Airport, and we've been called by Dave a few times to do some reconnaissance work after storms and that kind of stuff. But fortunately, we haven't had to do anything major yet, and hopefully not. So.
Thanks, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing that happened, the response in a few days later was that the state came in and took over the picnic area of Henry Cowell Park, and setting up their trailers, to support a large number of personnel, with the assumption that what happened with that earthquake was not the earthquake, it was a foreshock itself, and that there could be a greater 8 or 9 earthquake following up. And so they were actually staffing up under this possibility of that happening. And that was actually my first Aries assignment, was just basically hanging around.
Aries, meaning?
Amateur radio emergency service.
Huh?
Well, interestingly, many of you may know that when there's an earthquake, you may know that there's an opportunity with the USGS. It's like a did you feel it response program that they have. And it turns out that they actually are interested in collecting data. Here's Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. If you felt it, you can actually report it. You can report where you were when it happened and your situation and some details. What were you doing? Were you asleep? Did others feel it? How would you describe it? How did you react?
No reaction.
Yeah. How did you respond? I think it's just fascinating and great that here they are, today still collecting data on these and many earthquakes. It'd be, if it's something that interests you, you could investigate earthquake.usgs.gov, and maybe you felt some of the other quakes around California and elsewhere. I'll name a few. 1992 was a 6.5 in Big Bear, California. Also 1992 was in Cape Mendocino was a 7.2. In Northridge, Southern California, 1994 was a 6.7. And in 2019, there was a pair of earthquakes. They call it a series in Ridgecrest.
Yes.
A 7.1 and a 6.4. So we should be no strangers to seismology affecting us. So, oh, and then what was I gonna? There was something I was gonna show you. Oh, yes. Sorry, let me go back to a screen share real quick. And this is just a graphic that is from San Francisco Chronicle. I picked it because it just did a nice job of visually showing us all of the faults running through, Bay Area. San Gregorio Fault in green. This is the San Andreas Fault in this red color. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Piscines Fault in this light purple. Calaveras Fault. Hayward Fault in orange. And Greenville, Green Valley, Concord, Berryessa. And then this rubric here in the text, let's see if I can, what they're doing here is they're saying that 72% is the overall probability of a magnitude 6.7 or greater striking somewhere in the Bay Area by the year 2043. And I mean, like you, we've just been waiting for the next big quake within 30 years. And so, this is, we still have a very good probability of a large quake.
Can I make a comment on here, Tammy?
Yeah.
After the earthquake of '89, a local emergency preparedness group had here in the valley had a geologist from UCSC come up and talk to us, and one of the things he said was that the San Lorenzo Valley, which as we know is a north-south line pretty much between Santa Cruz and San Jose, that because of the geology around here, the San Lorenzo Valley is uniquely designed to be a release chain for earthquakes and the impact from earthquakes. That something that happens in the Bay Area kind of echoes down the valley as the waves disperse from the original epicenter. I'm only saying this because a lot of the people here on this call are from the valley. from the San Lorenzo Valley and through. So there's also a lot of fault lines that run through our area as well. Minor ones or smaller ones. So when we think about, oh, well, the Bay Area, why is that of concern to us? Because it will have a different impact in the San Lorenzo Valley than it might have down in the flatlands of Santa Cruz and Watsonville and down that way. So I just, that stuck with me, about his comment on that. Of course, we get the same thing with weather patterns as well. I don't know why it would be different, but I just wanted to share that as we look at this, we are not protected from this because of the mountains. We are sort of a pathway for the waves to run. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. So
Fascinating. Yeah, thanks.
mm-hmm.
All right, well, we're going to pivot and actually, Liz, if you wouldn't mind continuing, I think we're going to move into a refresher of a bit.
Right.
What do we expect when there's an earthquake, and what should we do?
Yes, happy to do this discussion. For those who don't know, although I recognize that many of you do, I'm very active in community emergency response training. And one of the things, this is a volunteer program that's set up to aid the community and the first responders or the professional responders in the event of an earthquake. We all know from storms and various other things here in our county that communities can become isolated very quickly. Our goal is to have someone in those communities who have had enough training to keep people alive and until the professional responders can get there. Well, earthquakes are always a scary thing because their impact is felt so widely. Dan, can we get those slides? Dan and I are not in the same room. So anyway, here's another example of where something has just fallen off and damaged a car. This is off of the FEMA website, by the way, and are the Ready California website. This information is generally available, but I'm reiterating it again because the more times you hear it, the more likely you are to remember it or practice it when a quake comes. So obviously the best time to prepare for certain aspects of earthquake is beforehand. Make sure your family has an emergency plan. Have everyone in your house. That would be the next slide on. Okay, that wasn't the one. That's okay. They're a little out of order, but it doesn't matter. If an earthquake happens, you need to protect yourself right away. Running around, grabbing your phone and trying to find out if the neighbor felt it is probably not a good tactic. At that point, you need to duck and cover and hold on. And we're going to go into that a little bit more in a minute. Here it says here, if you're in bed, turn face down, cover your head and neck with pillows, and prepare yourself because stuff is going to fall. Windows are going to break. If you're outside, stay outside away from buildings. And also obviously be observing what's going on around you in case something like power lines or something are falling. And if you're inside. Don't go outside. The other thing is the old trick of standing in a doorway is no longer what we recommend. And part of that is because it's a great way to get part of you smushed in a door that's flopping around. So the best thing is get under or under whatever will cover you. Stay there, hold on. You want to hold on because if you hide under a table with wheels on it, it may go, you may suddenly lose your cover. So you want to hold on to that, whatever it is you're under, so that it doesn't move around and expose you more. Protecting yourself here as we go down is the drop, cover, and hold on. That's the 3 words that are the crux of earthquake response. And I'm going to go on beyond this. All of this is available on various websites. All you have to do is click in and put in earthquake response. Let's move on down. Okay, lots of stuff can happen after an earthquake, and it can be damage to your building, can be, I know that after the 89 quake, our water heater fell over. Fortunately, it was fairly contained, and the line was damaged. But there can be lots of stuff. So you need to take care of yourself first in this environment.
Well, the water heater was strapped in place. It just moved around enough to break one of the flex hoses.
Okay. So I don't think I want to go through each and every line here. If you have questions, please ask me. I'm really a big advocate for strapping your bookcases to the wall. After the earthquake of ours, most of ours were strapped, but one that wasn't took an entry of a part of it fell over, hit the wall across from it, and dumped all of the books in it on the floor in the pathway from the living room to the kitchen. So getting over that was dangerous in itself.
That's basically what happened to me in my office in Sunnyvale. I got a bookcase of binders dumped on me, and I had to crawl over that to get out the door.
Yep. And that was also where our TV walked off the bookcase and fell on the floor because the shelving was attached to the wall. So the shelving part worked really well. But we're talking now about what to do during the event. Cover yourself. If you cannot get down on your knees, then cover your head. If in whatever position you are, get down low, get under cover, and protect your head and neck as best you can. I like this line here. If you are trapped, send a text or bang on a wall or pipe. During the Haiti earthquake, which I think was in 10, it's been quite a while now, they were finding people using their cell phones. So that was a very successful strategy, because if people would tell them where they were, then they would send somebody there to find them rather than, anyway, it was very successful. All right, let's go to the next sheet.
Is that one? Nope, that's where we are.
Yeah, this is
That's
about
the next
different,
page.
yeah. This is different ways of protecting yourself if you're not able-bodied. So, and I think, you know, talking about this with the people you live with, to remind them how they should respond, having drills, and, you know, what I used to do at work, I worked at the hospital, and I would just walk in where everybody was standing and say, we just had an earthquake, what are you going to do? I would do that on the 17th of October. They'd all look at me like I was nuts, but then several came up to me and said, you know, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I would have had to think about it and not be safe. So we can go to the next sheet. Okay.
It's it. The plan is the last.
Yeah. So protect your homes, secure large pieces of furniture as best you can. If you have precious glass items or ceramic items, they make this stuff called museum wax, which is kind of, you put it on the bottom of it and it sticks it to the shelf. So it's less likely to go sliding around or falling out.
Liz hasn't seen my part of the presentation tonight.
No. Why? Am I getting in your spot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, afterward, after the shaking has stopped enough, you need to get solid shoes on. You need to get dressed appropriately before you even go out, because, you know, when that 5 pounds of sugar hit the floor, it was a glass container. So I had sugar and glass all over the kitchen. So the first thing to do is to prepare yourself to deal with the situation. And because if you get injured, you won't be available to help with those who were injured. And as we talk about things today, this plan or whatever, I also want to comment that this is what CERT teaches. And what CERT teaches is what ReadyGov teaches, is what FEMA teaches. It's what the experts on response teach. And you may read other suggestions about how to respond, but based on life in America, what we're teaching is the stuff that has been vetted by the professionals. So drop, cover, hold on until things stop shaking. And that's good for the aftershocks as well. So any questions? Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in real quick, and I would be remiss to not point out that our Santa Cruz County OR3 website has a page on earthquakes. And there's some nice information here, including this very detailed and informative brochure, Staying Safe, Where the Earth Shakes. So that's a PDF that you can download and read. Also, of course, some guides here. Advice about preparing. Here's your rubric of drop, cover, and hold on. And we do have Dave Reed from OR3 here this evening, and in just a few minutes we'll actually one of the things I would like to ask Dave is more about the county's response and recovery. I wanted to make sure that you all saw this, and I'll just also give a shameless plug to the the Slivin website. We've got a lot of topics, and we also do keep up a number of informative links that are topic related. So don't forget to check that out. So then with that, let's move on. Dan, what can you tell us more about preparing our property and homes for?
Okay, well, looking at this subject from two aspects of the preparing your home for an earthquake, externally and internally. Let's see. There we go. First of all, the couple of observations that I'd like to make, and not an expert on a geologist or seismic activity or even building construction, but I've noticed that look at all of these photos of buildings that fell down, and if you look at even the ones, even the what we call stick built, the wood frame buildings, if they're built on solid ground, even if they fell off the foundation, even the one in Boulder Creek that had its entire ground floor collapse under it, they're by and large still intact. So it seemed like it's a relatively safe place, safe building to be if most of our homes are wood frame. And the ones that were damaged by the '89 earthquake or any subsequent earthquakes have been either completely replaced and built to new standards or have been retrofitted. But for those that haven't been retrofitted, as in, even minimally just bolting the foundation to the house, there's two websites I wanted to point out. One is the California Earthquake Authority, which is a state organization that helps people with upgrading their homes. There's often there are grants that are available for that can be applied for, and in fact, there's a new grant cycle just starting. Unfortunately, it does not apply to our area. When they say Bay Area, they're not talking about our Bay Area. But I just wanted to point that out. The second one, earthquakesafety.com, I found it to be a great source of information. This is a company that used to do retrofits, but ceased to do it in 2013, but they're still maintaining their website. And for the best of my, understanding, it looks like a lot of good information. And there's also a huge number of references to websites. So for my opinion is, your wood frame house is probably the best place to be, with some caveats. During the earthquakes, anything that's not bolted down is going to start moving. And if you're in the path of something that's falling, you're going to possibly get hurt or trapped. This is a curious picture of somebody's garage where one cabinet falls over, but there's stuff on top of this other cabinet that's completely undisturbed. This was fascinating. This is obviously a very old picture. We've got a Apple Macintosh over here, and it looks like a chair. And it looks like if somebody were working at that, they might have gotten hit on the head by this unsecured metal cabinets. So, and notice too that the drop ceiling is fairly unaffected. It looks like maybe one tile fell out. Maybe that's it sitting there. Other stuff looks fairly unperturbed, but these two cabinets just came right over, possibly orientation relative to the fault. So if what's the first thing we want to do is screw those cabinets to the wall. There are so many different methods available. You know, I've usually do the extremely elegant, you know, angle bracket that you find at any hardware store and just screw it into a stud. But if you look on Amazon or, you know, often your local hardware store will have many solutions for attaching bookshelves and cabinets to the wall. I think the two main important thing is to try and go for the stud and not rely on a drywall anchor. And that's why I included a picture of a stud finder. And of course, the other thing you have to watch out for is not drill, put your screw through the top of the cabinet. This picture here that shows anchored at 3 places is nice, but it seems a bit overkill. I'd rather go for two brackets into studs if you can do it. Some of these solutions also work on a more flexible to allow the cabinetry to move a bit. Now the story about the cabinet that the TV cabinet that we bolted to the wall, what happened was there was a smaller earthquake in August before so it was up, 5 maybe before the October earthquake, and that had motivated me to bolt the biggest cabinet to the wall. Unfortunately, I didn't bolt the bookcase to the wall that fell over and blocked the path from the living room to the rest of the house. There's an interesting WikiHow article about securing a bookcase on a wall, and in this case, they're using Velcro. So Velcro has a lot of strength in, if you're trying to pull it apart on the same plane. So it's possibly a good solution. So you've attached your bookcases and cabinets to the walls, but now you've still got nothing to prevent them from emptying. I gotta change this. There it goes. I want to point out something down here on this bottom picture. If you notice our stuffed animal dog here is demonstrating the proper thing to do during an earthquake and hiding under the chair, just something that the rest of us don't usually do. This is a picture from a Napa earthquake, which was only a 5.1, but it basically emptied these shells. I'm assuming these shells were, what's on here was from being restocked, but it doesn't take a large earthquake to throw stuff onto the floor. So what can you do about it? Well, turns out baby proofing equals earthquake proofing. All these solutions for keeping babies or toddlers from opening the cabinets are actually useful from keeping the contents from exiting the cabinets. These latches I've used before and they work really well, and eventually you just get used to depressing the latch when you open the cabinet, and it really doesn't interfere much at all. And these are really cheap. They're only $2 a piece. I would, of course, focus on the cabinets that are higher than the ones on the floor, because you still can have a mess, but it's not likely to be, raining containers of sugar or, bottles of wine. Another solution is to deal with books, or, in this case, binders. There are these basically like bungee cord material that are pre-made that you can connect to your bookcase, or what we've done at MCR in our CERT office is to just take Velcro, which has become really cheap, and attach one end of the hook line and one end of the loop line and to either end of the cabinet, and then just bring them together, and they kind of just will use the Velcro to basically make a barrier from the stuff riding off of the cabinet. This was ingenious. This couple had a toddler that liked to take the books off the shelf, and they just took bicycle inner tubes and put them over the top of the bookcase and rolled them down, and that kept the toddler from taking the books. And the toddler then became engrossed with playing with the rubber band, playing with it as if it was a rubber band, and pulling it back and letting it go. So not only prefers toddler proof, earthquake proof, and entertainment. So what if it can't be contained with Velcro or bicycle inner tubes? Well, then, as Liz mentioned, there's museum wax. So this is a sticky, it's wax. It's different than regular wax, but it's a little stickier, and you just put 3 or 4 dabs on the bottom of something, and it'll stick to your shelf. I didn't know about this, but there's also this gorilla mounting putty, which might also be good. This company, Quakehold, sells a lot of products that are designed for this market, for the earthquake proofing market, and they have a good demonstration of how the museum wax could be used to anchor stuff down. So that's basically the message is, while it's great to have your house be brought up to earthquake standards, by and large, these wood frame buildings are pretty structurally sound on their own. What the biggest worry is from flying debris and falling cabinets, and and that's part of why we tell people to hide under the chairs and under the desks, is that stuff is going to fall. So I guess the last message is that don't let perfect being you have the perfect up to code building prevent you from doing good enough and securing the contents inside that building. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. And I'd love to show one more thing, which is there is an organization called the California, what's an organization or webpage, California Residential Mitigation Program. And this is an organization that has in the past had like a retrofit program with possibly some monies that could be applied for. I don't believe they have a program going currently, but their webpage is still really informative. So let me just point this out, the Do I Need a Retrofit page. And if you scroll down here, what they actually are prepared to show you is how to consider retrofits for a variety of building conditions. And these, I think, are very informative. Let's just dive into one to just show you very quickly. So this one is raised foundation house. And so they can talk about bolting and bracing retrofits. And they've got some images to help you understand what your before and after can look like. So, you can look at a before photo and say, well, is that me? Is that my house? And what could it look like when it's properly braced and bolted? So I just think that there's some really thoughtful analysis given to this with references and resources. So that's just one example of many on this website. I definitely recommend that. So with that, let's talk about what we expect in terms of the immediate aftermath of a major earthquake in our area and what response might look like. So with that, I'd like to invite Dave Reed, from Director of OR3. Welcome. And what could you tell us this evening?
Good evening, everybody. A couple things, and then I'll get into it. So for those that don't know, I'm actually a geologist by education. So all this conversation's been super entertaining. There's a book out by my master's thesis advisor, Gary Griggs. If people haven't seen it, California Catastrophes. I've been reading it recently. I actually was reading the earthquake section during the week of our 35th year anniversary. I was in Washington at the time, so I wasn't here, but it's an interesting read, and all of you should have been interviewed for the book based on the conversations you guys were having at the beginning. So just a little bit, and then happy to answer questions or have a conversation around what we do in the aftermath. And I think with the audience here, John and Dan and the Aries team, I think the first thing that we're going to be managing post major earthquake in this time is that our peripheral brain is not going to be working very well with all likelihood, right? The cellular network will undoubtedly be negatively impacted by a major catastrophic earthquake. So the first thing we're going to be trying to do is get situational awareness, damage inventory stuff. We're going to be leaning on our analog technology partners like Aries, like the MERS radios networks, trying to get information from our CERT teams that, will probably go out, self-deploy in all likelihood, since we won't be able to converse with anybody, to start to do damage assessments. And that's where, as Liz said, the training that folks that are part of CERT is so critical. Like, you guys will know what to do in terms of some of that stuff, and then we'll start to try and gather information to try and understand what scale and support we need. The other reality that I think is interesting to think about / keeps me up at night in the context of this type of disaster, and all of you lived through it, so this is preaching to the choir a little bit, but unlike the 8 federally declared disasters we've had in the last 7 years, those disasters impact somewhat of an isolated section of the population, right? The flooding in South County, the flooding in Felton Grove, landslides in certain areas. So lots of people were impacted, right? But not everybody. And one thing of significance and distinction with an earthquake is we're all going to be impacted by it at the same time. So the scale and magnitude of that type of impact means we're not going to be able to support everybody in a timely manner. And really the first part of it is going to be, and a bit around the preparedness that was discussed, is really people are going to have to be prepared to take care of themselves probably for days, right? The first day 24 hours, 36 hours, as folks mentioned, we'll be putting out fires, we'll be stabilizing things, identifying critical both communication and transportation pathways, and then trying to probably start to mobilize at the state and federal level, bringing the needed supplies in, food, water, fuel, telecommunications infrastructure to reestablish some of these basic lifeline services. And obviously with, with any of these disasters, the protection of life is our highest priority. So we'll be trying to identify folks that need that immediate health care and support, but it may be neighbors helping neighbors, right? Somebody got hit in the head by their flying tchotchke off the side of their bookshelf, and they've got a cut on their forehead, and it's not life-threatening, but somebody helps them with some basic first aid. In the valley in particular, I can imagine the fire stations will be mobile kind of medical triage locations, and then hopefully if we need emergent support to anyone, we'll be able to figure that out through either the FirstNet AT&T network that in theory is supposed to prioritize emergency traffic if the cellular network is up, or old school radios. John and Dan will be critical parts, and the whole Aries team will be critical parts of that communication piece. So those are some of the initial pieces, because I think the interesting reality for us in California, and again reading this book and talking a little bit about the catastrophic earthquakes we've had historically, very few of them that have caused significant damage have happened in the age of cell phones. So yeah, certainly, Japan and other communities around the country and around the Pacific Rim have had major earthquakes during the age of cell phones. But we haven't. So it'll be, people will feel lost because they don't have a communication device. They can't search the internet for information. They can't find all of the, the stuff that's on their phone. And the other reality, right? I pay for things on my phone or on my watch. Who carries cash around? So there'll be issues with people who literally can't pay for things because there's no cellular system, right? And so it will be, I expect, somewhat, prehistoric or vintage, shall we say, for the audience here. But we're gonna have to get through it together, right? I think there's preparedness for earthquake, and there's planning and preparedness, but really we're all going to be reacting, right? We're all going to be figuring it out, and it'll be working together, communicating together, and working with state and federal partners, because the entire Bay Area will be impacted. So the 9 million people in the Bay Area, the 270-some thousand people here, there will be strategic prioritization of who gets what when, and depending on what the road network looks like, as Liz said, if Highway 17 is down and stuff has to come in over Highway 9, you can't get semis over Highway 9 in any meaningful way. So you'll be coming from South County, depending on what South County looks like. You could be coming down Highway 1, who knows? So we'll be trying to figure all that stuff out in real time, and then trying to build a strategy in those days 2, 3, and 4 to start to get supplies to folks, knowing that after 2 or 3 days, supplies for folks will start to run thin, right? Water, basic supplies. It's interesting to watch the North Carolina kind of CPOD, community points of distribution network, springing up in and around Ashford, right? Because people didn't have food and water. They weren't prepared for the devastation, and they were, getting cases of water and rationing their water in the aftermath of just that hurricane. So I imagine it'll be a bit, very similar and harrowing for sure. Just good bedtime conversation to, just the light stuff. But damage inventory stuff will be important. Critical facility inspection stuff. So we will send out county inspectors to inspect critical facilities. We'll start to set up congregate sheltering locations for folks whose homes are damaged. All of the standard kind of disaster stuff will happen. It will just happen slower, right? We won't be able to turn the lights on at SLV High School. We'll have to go out there and inspect the high school as an example, right? We'll have to go out and have our folks make sure that it's safe to occupy. And if it's not, then, we'll have to figure something else out. A couple other things that came to mind in the conversation today, right? And it's in the book. Not that I'm plugging Gary's book, but is Loma Prieta happened in the fall after a prolonged dry spell, right? And drought. 1906 actually happened in I think they said April. It was in April, mid-April, and so landslides and the moisture from the rainy season had a much bigger impact. So when an earthquake happens will also dictate some of the geologic impacts. Slope stability. When I was working for a geotechnical engineering firm, we would do seismic testing of soils, and you would saturate the soil, and then you would shear it to determine how strong the soil is to then design the foundation to support the house. And you would do it under saturated conditions because that's like the worst case scenario. So it really does depend on when the earthquake hits as to what level of destruction may happen. And also obviously which fault is a big part of it. It's good to remind this group, even though most of you aren't close to the ocean, that you think drop, cover, hold, all the things, but if you're also near the ocean, it's get away from the ocean, because there is a risk, however slight, that the submarine canyon could have a slope failure that causes a tsunami that hits right after the earthquake. So that's the Armageddon Hollywood outcome of an earthquake, but it is something that in an earthquake we will also be communicating to the public to get away from the ocean, at least in the minutes afterwards. So I don't know. I don't want to ramble too much. I know it's been a full conversation tonight, but that's some of the things that I wanted to just highlight in terms of how we're going to respond in the immediate days afterwards.
Thank you, Dave. I think you've hit all the right notes on those. I wanted to ask John Gerhardt, Aries member and the Aries District Emergency Coordinator for the county. John, tell us from the perspective of ham radio and probably our attendees this evening have known we've covered talking about communications and radio communications before. Aries Amateur Radio Emergency Services is a particular group of folks using ham radio. But what else how else would we understand folks who are ham radio enthusiasts? What would we expect would happen in the event of a disaster like an earthquake? And then and again, also, how is this connected to Aries and any specific communications role that you guys have with the county?
Sure. Well, what we tell our members is if there's a major disaster, earthquake, or anything like that, their very first responsibility is to take care of themselves, their family, their homes, and make sure they're secure. And only if they're confident of that should they volunteer to join the group and help others. We
regularly practice various kinds of activities over the radio that we know are similar to things that will happen during an emergency. So, for example, part of the reason our little radios that we hams use work so much better than the very similar little radios that MERS makes possible is because of a very good network of privately run amateur radio repeaters through the county. There are several of them that are particularly designed to cover the San Lorenzo Valley, and they make it possible for a ham with the right equipment and the right local knowledge to talk around the county with very modest equipment. And this will greatly facilitate local communications. We think the challenge in a disaster is going to be local communications. I have just a couple of slides here to illustrate that point. I won't take too long here, and I'll certainly entertain questions. This is the usual ham radio claim. We claim to be disaster proof, and I can get my screen to advance. I thought it'd be useful just to explain why that is. The radios are not that different. They look the same. The ham stuff costs a little more. It's a little more flexible. But the main reason it works, there are a couple of reasons why it works better. It's our dedicated volunteers. It's our coordination with OR3 training, and the fact that our communications infrastructure is completely independent, doesn't depend on PG&E, doesn't depend on Comcast, depends only on the equipment which individual members have purchased and developed and practiced with. And I was talking about repeaters just a few moments ago. They allow our little radios to work well because the repeaters are located up in high places that are easy to connect to. And here's some of the repeaters that have particularly good coverage in the San Lorenzo Valley. These things are set up and maintained by amateurs or by amateur radio clubs. We do it at our own expense. We're a little strange. We think this is fun to do. And they're quite robust. They have backup battery supplies, which allow them to operate for days. They're earthquake proofed. But if they stop working, we know what to do anyway, because we practice that regularly. This is an upside down map of Santa Cruz. North is at the bottom, but the red dots show people who participated in one of our regular weekly practice sessions on the radio. And so you can see we've got members scattered through the county. So after a major earthquake, it's going to be hard to get around, but we've got people around everywhere. So in a sense, we're pre-deployed, which is a good thing. And we practice for this kind of thing. We've got, we're lucky we have dedicated space in the County Emergency Operations Center, dedicated for what's called auxiliary communications. That's us, that's our volunteers. And we communicate regularly around the county and around the state. The picture shows a drill we had not too long ago where had multiple radio operators operating at the same time. And because we're in the Emergency Operations Center, we've got emergency power, we have spare equipment, and we have operators who know what they're doing. We also have backup communication links between the county and state government. And we operate on Department of Homeland Security radio channels and also ham radio channels, and we test this every week. So if you can imagine a disaster where there's no way to communicate between Santa Cruz and Sacramento except shortwave radio, I'm not sure that would ever happen. But if it does, we test it every week and we'll be able to do it. The way this is planned to work in the county is within a neighborhood, a small area. We've got local groups, CERT groups, Sliven certainly, Firewise teams communicating with these short-range unlicensed radios, often centered around a local fire station. And between the neighbors and neighborhoods and to and from the Emergency Operations Center, we've got hams with better equipment, better training who can communicate. And we've got arrangements with large animal rescue folks, the Equine Evac group, and we are equipped to travel with them and keep them in contact as necessary during an emergency. Another thing ham radio is good for is health and welfare assurances to distant family. Even if regular communications channels are partly operational, they are likely to be busy with traffic relating to life and supplies. And it's not going to be easy to call Aunt Martha in Toledo and tell her everyone's fine, but we can do that with ham radio. There's a lot of that that's been going on with Hurricane Milton, and certainly during the Loma Prieta earthquake, that was active as well. And we can also communicate by email over amateur radio. Some things are better communicated via text. And it's kind of fun. And if anybody hearing this is interested in joining us, talk to any Aries member, and we'll be glad to help you join the group. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Back to you, Tammy.
I have my hand up. I have a group of people that are on Lockhart Gulch, and there are 2 ham radio operators. I've pointed them to Aries. I don't know whether they ever contacted you or anything, but if they haven't, would they be able to communicate with someone in Aries?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to know.
Hams can talk to each other, and we don't check their membership credential before we answer. We're happy to talk to anyone. We like people to join the group because we practice this stuff and we think we'll be better at it for the practicing. But in an emergency, they'll be improvising, as Dave alluded to, and certainly hams. I'm not sure whether the Lockhart Gulch folks are in the group or not, but they could talk to us, and we will certainly enlist them in the activities that are underway. That's a good question, Gwen.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Very informative. I wanted to just very briefly touch on one of the earthquake apps that you can get on your phone. Maybe most of you know of this, which is did I get the right one? The MyShake app. This is I'm just going to their website, myshake.berkeley.edu, but you could probably also find the MyShake app on your Android or Apple application store, or whatever those special names are for those. And so the MyShake app is trying to give you an early warning. It may be within seconds of a quake, and you can create an account where you establish a home base location, commonly your own home, and that can be, it can still give you an alert even if you are not there. So this page is here, obviously trying to show you some of the features of what this app has. And so like I said, I had this app, put it on my phone some time ago, forgot about it. And the September 29 Aroma quake came through on my phone. I believe it was very early in the morning, and woke me up. And I just remember it saying earthquake, earthquake, and felt it, and that was I thought that was a very good result. Very pleased by that. So just give a plug for that app. I don't know if there are others, and if anyone else happens to have an advice for any, I'd entertain a comment.
I had an interesting thing happen with their test alert that came out on the anniversary, and I didn't receive it. I had received other alerts, but I had just bought a new phone and transferred everything over, and I had set things at such a high level because I was getting earthquake alerts every 15 seconds, it seemed like. and I had it set to like 5. And I didn't want to hear anything unless it was a 5. Well, that alert didn't come through because it was set at 5. So I have moved that back down again, just kind of an FYI to anybody that's got that app and listens to it.
Can I add a non-endorsement app awareness that I've had recently, and maybe many of you are already on it, and I'm just late to the party. But I've recently become a watch duty convert. I find it to be very timely, almost scary how quickly it is able to provide intel. Bob, I love your cat's addition to the meeting. So for those who don't have it, it's a wildfire app that can alert you to wildfires, whatever, or any kind of fire, structure fire, significant fires in your area. You can pick up to 4 counties. For me, in my role, I have all of our surrounding counties in Santa Cruz County listed, and I get alerts. And we just had a fire over by Trebing in Buena Vista again yesterday, and it was remarkable how fast it was updating information based on CAL FIRE. And then I was updating Zone Haven or Genesis Protect, and it was almost instantaneously updating based on when I literally clicked the button to change the zone status. Within a minute or two, the Watch Duty app was telling everybody that these are the zones that are now evacuation warning or order. So it's a good tool. I don't know how the artificial intelligence is gathering all the information, or the bots or whatever they are, but it's timely. So I just wanted to share that lived experience recently.
Thank you very much for that. It's great. I'll add that to my list on my device. All right, and then we've got a little bit of time left. I wanted to save some time for Joel Loucher from United Policyholders. United Policyholders is a fantastic nonprofit organization helping consumers with insurance. Obviously, very busy with providing information for people who have suffered fire damage, but in the context of earthquakes, I thought it would be useful, educational, informational to invite Joel on and tell us a little bit about earthquake insurance. So Joel, I'll let you have take a few moments to give some introductory remarks, and then I'll be prepared to present your slide.
I think you can go right into the slides. There's nothing more exciting than insurance at the end of the day. And I know you've saved the best for last, as everybody loves talking about insurance whenever they get. So everybody, if you have a mortgage, you have to have homeowners insurance of some kind or fire insurance. But earthquake insurance is an optional coverage. It has major sales right after an earthquake, and then its popularity falls off until the next big earthquake comes. I think less than 10% of homeowners have earthquake coverage. So they've chosen the not to buy here, but we're just going to talk a little bit about it so that people kind of know to make a decision of whether it's right for them. Again, I'm not a salesperson. I work for a nonprofit. We don't sell insurance, but we do help people work through claims processes. And of course, after an earthquake, you don't have insurance. It's not really a claims process, right? It's a hitting your wallet process, but hopefully that never happens. So next slide, please. So again, nonprofit. I have given recent presentations to Bonnie Doon and Half Moon Bay, and I've done other parts of Santa Cruz. I was there in Felton, staffing the response center after the CZU fire. Again, in that position, helping people work through their fire claims and losses. And again, it's all something we do based on donations to our organization. So next slide, please. I'll move quickly. So probably all of you are aware, if you're a homeowner or if you're a renter or you live in a condominium complex, that your homeowner's policy, renter's policy, does not automatically include earthquake coverage. It's something, every insurer does have to offer. Few people take them up on that offer, despite the fact that, we've been talking about a couple of major earthquakes we've had in this area. And this area happens to be one a little more prone to damage than others. Of course, LA has the same issue. And after the Northridge earthquake, for example, most people there did not have any earthquake coverage to help them, through the recovery process. We are fortunate in California to have the California Earthquake Authority, which came into being when most insurers no longer wanted to offer earthquake coverage. So we're fortunate to have that. It's very financially strong and highly likely, I'll go with, to be able to pay all its claims, even in a major loss. So there are a few other competitors in this market. I'll talk about those in a moment. Let's go to the next slide, please. So earthquake coverage, again, can be pretty pricey, and just like fire coverage, the higher risk your home has of suffering earthquake damage, the higher the premiums are. So if in our part of California here, we're going to have pretty high premium rates and premiums, but that's because it's a value to have it more likely than in other areas. And just like your fire coverage, the higher your deductible, the less the premium is. And in our fire coverage, we're typically talking like $500 deductible, $1,000 deductible. And I do have to kind of preach there on your homeowner's policy. A lot of people still have something like a $500 or $1,000 deductible. you really don't want to make a claim of that small of a claim on your policy. Your coverage for homeowners should be something you only use when you really need to. So you should be increasing your deductible to more like $5,000 or even $10,000, whatever amount of loss you could reasonably withstand yourself financially. That's what you want to raise your deductible to, because a claim is a negative. It raises your premium. It makes you more likely to be non-renewed. In earthquake coverage, we're typically talking about 10%, 15%, or 20% deductibles. So of course, those are major league amounts of money, but you really, if you can, you want to go with something like a 15% deductible, just to bring the cost of that insurance into a reasonable range. So next slide, please. Okay, so all right, I already talked about the 10%. One of the issues here is that you should never risk more than 10% of your liquid assets without some kind of protection. And of course, an earthquake could take out your home. So it really makes sense for anybody that owns a home to purchase earthquake and coverage, despite the fact that we, typically don't. It just, it's a lot of money. And I'm sure I'm talking to a group of homeowners here that already is feeling the hurt of how much your homeowner's insurance is increasing, potentially doubling or tripling in the last few years. So to even consider purchasing, another insurance policy is hard to imagine. But imagine if your home is destroyed and you have no coverage whatsoever. Even a minor earthquake could damage a significant amount of your belongings and do major structural damage, even if you don't have a major loss. So, and I think we all see on Nextdoor how much rent is per month in Santa Cruz County. $3,000 a month I have here. That, of course, probably isn't even the range of reasonable of what temporary rents would be, probably greater than $5,000 a month. So earthquake coverage does make sense if you can afford it. Next slide, please. There are several companies that offer earthquake coverage. It really makes it can vary greatly between one company and the other. I personally, ever since the Loma Prieta earthquake, have purchased earthquake coverage. I actually am with Palomar, but GeoVera, Pacific Specialty, Coast Select, and the Earthquake Authority all are competitors in this market. And so just like homeowners insurance, if you can get more than one quote, you're going to want more than one quote for earthquake coverage. And you should at least check it out. Don't assume it's just too expensive. I think Palomar might be cheaper than Earthquake Authority, but it may vary from territory to territory or county to county. So just give it a try to see, what you're talking about, so that if you do decide not to purchase it, at least you're making an informed decision. So next slide, please. So here's some websites, again, to help you kind of understand both some mitigation assistance you might be able to get, more information about earthquake insurance in general, and more information about retrofitting. And some of the conversation tonight has been about bracing and bolting. There are times when the Earthquake Authority does put out brace and bolt grants. You know, there are various grants that go around also from county to county. So it's something you want to keep an eye out for. Many homes built in the 60s, you know, can do well in an earthquake, but they are not necessarily bolted to the foundation. And it is a pretty pricey endeavor in today's labor market to pay for contractors, even if your home is pretty solid, but to put it back onto a foundation is going to cost a substantial thousands of dollars. So, you know, think about doing the brace and bolt. You know, these are steps, at least if you're not going to buy the earthquake coverage, if you do everything to mitigate your risk, you can feel, you know, better about your process of the decisions you made. And so next slide, please. So this might have, I think we've kind of discussed this a lot already, but, you know, there's a lot of things obviously you can do around your home to make sure things are secured. And I think we probably talked about it enough that I don't need to go through it again here. But you want to reduce your own damage, right? Even people who buy earthquake coverage, that 10-15% deductible isn't going to pay for the TV or, you know, any of your things in your living room that break, because that's all going to fall under the deductible. And so you're really going to want to secure your valuables as best you can, because, you know, the only money you're going to have towards replacing them is your own money. Next slide, please. And I do want to mention, because I'm talking to an audience that is probably paying a lot more this year than 5 years ago for homeowners insurance. Maybe many of you are in the FAIR plan, I don't know. But I do want to say on our website, we do have some home insurance shopping tips, how to scour the market, you know, to find homeowners insurance if at all possible. You know, a lot of times we find that people go to their agent, you know, they get non-renewed, they ask their agent if anyone else will write coverage on their home. And when the agent says no, but I can put you with the FAIR plan, that is where you end up. But there are many agents representing many other insurers. There are like 80 homeowners insurers in California. And before I would end up with the FAIR plan, I would at least, you know, give a shot to trying out as many of those insurers as I could. Next slide, please. The department.
And why is that?
Why is it what?
Why would you look at other insurers other than the FAIR plan?
Because a couple reasons. The FAIR plan is a fire-only policy, and it's very expensive because you're in a pool with the highest risk homeowners in the state. And so if you can emerge from that pool with an admitted insurer, then you are able to buy a single policy, right, a homeowner's policy, as opposed to a FAIR plan policy combined with a difference in conditions policy, which is what most people do to kind of approximate what a homeowner's policy would be. And, you know, it's just, then you have a single insurer to deal with if you do have a claim rather than two different insurers. But I think it's best just in terms of it is less expensive and it is generally going to be a superior policy, that homeowner's policy, versus a combined difference in conditions and FAIR plan policy. And really the FAIR plan is an insurer of last resort, and is not well known for its claims handling kind of experience. They contract with adjusters, and you know, they're not necessarily about customer service. So I think they're are a lot of reasons, but mostly it's typically just a better deal if you can find another admitted insurer. Right here on this slide, this is the Department of Insurance website. There's a one of the things I point out there is the top 10 tips is one of the kind of choices that you can select. That top 10 tips includes a list of the 800 numbers of every admitted insurer that's writing homeowners coverage in California. You can call that 800 number and see, well, will you sell me insurance directly, or can you tell me the closest agent to where I live? And I will say honestly that this is probably a wild goose chase to find another insurer if you are in a heavily forested and high, steep slope of an area in today's market. But to me, it's still worth the effort to try to get out of the FAIR plan and get a better, cheaper coverage through an admitted carrier. And so I recommend, making the effort. If you can't find anybody, then, stick with the FAIR plan. But if you do, I think you'd be very happy to get out of the FAIR plan. Now, if there are any other questions about that, I welcome them. So, and then again, there's another tool there. There's a home insurance finder tool that hopefully you put in your address and it can identify insurers in your area. And just a note, probably no one here has heard of American Modern Mutual or American Hardware Mutual, or there are a bunch of insurers that you have probably never heard of. So again, if you're with State Farm agents typically only represent State Farm. So their only alternative to offer you is going to be the FAIR plan. But even if you're with, an independent agent that might represent 5 or 6 companies, again, there are like 80 companies that write homeowners insurance. It's going to be tough, and that may change. Next slide, please. That may change over time if the plan that the California Insurance Commissioner is putting in place works. But if it does change, it's going to be because the admitted insurers are going to be able to charge you a lot more money than they currently do. So we always recommend, and again, this is just because I have you here paying attention at the moment. However, many of you are still out there. It really makes sense to inventory your property, your personal property. And I know it would be very challenging to make a list of every valuable item you own. I'm suggesting doing something much easier, which is simply taking a video on your phone of, all the furniture in your home, opening the cabinets, opening the drawers, opening the cupboards to just show, exactly what you own. Because if you ever are in a position where you're going to need to make a claim, you're going to want evidence of what it is that you had in your home. And that might be not easy to get after a loss. So this at least gives you some evidence for your insurance company of the level of contents that you had in your home. Makes the claims process a lot easier in terms of the insurer trusting and believing the claim that you make. It's just going to speed up an otherwise really challenging process. If any of you have been through a total loss, I think you really understand just how challenging doing the contents portion alone of a claim can be. Next slide, please. So I hope if you get a chance, you go online to our website at uphelp.org, take our home survey. Next slide, please. There's a lot of disaster information out there through the state. I listed some websites earlier. Here's another one. Listos, California has a lot of disaster ready guides, good for both earthquake and fire. It's all free to you. So listoscalifornia.org. Next slide, please. And uphelp.org, which is where I work. And if anybody has any questions about insurance in general, I welcome them. Anything you want to ask. At 8:08 p.m.
Fantastic.
Probably not many.
Thank you so much, Joel. And I'm glad that you emphasized here your website. I find your organization to be supremely informative for consumers. I hope everyone has an opportunity to see the depth and breadth of kind of support advocacy that you guys report on of all the things you do. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Joel, could you put the web address for the California Fire Insurance Help page back on the screen or maybe in the chat?
The California Department of Insurance,
No, your organization.
UP Help up, or United Policyholders is uphelp.org.
And was there a specific page for California Fire Insurance?
Most of it's about fire insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Readily find a shopping on there if you put in shopping for coverage.
Thanks for the talk.
And you're welcome, Tammy, to share my PowerPoint with anybody that is interested in seeing any of the information on it.
Yeah, that's great. I think what we'd like to do is basically post a link to the document so that they can review those slides. Thank you so much. And with that, we come to the end of this evening's agenda. I think, Dan, I think you can maybe stop recording. And if anyone would like to stay for a few minutes,